So, today we're going to explore a story that I think a lot of us can connect with on a really deep level. It's not one of those big, dramatic love stories. It's about the quiet, sometimes painful process of letting go. This is the story of Ayaan and Meher.
And this quote right here really gets to the heart of it. The idea that some love stories don't end with happily ever after, but they end with strength. It completely reframes how we look at an ending, not as a failure, but as, well, a different kind of success, a victory for personal growth.
So let's start at the beginning, which for them was, well, it was quiet. It wasn't some fireworks in the sky moment. It was much softer than that.
Their connection was really built on these small, simple things, The kind of bond that just sneaks up on you. It becomes a part of your everyday life without you even noticing. It was just easy, comfortable. It just was.
But here's where it gets interesting. They were so different in how they loved. Ayaan was expressive, he loved out loud, and he kind of expected that same intensity back. Meher, on the other hand, loved quietly. She felt that real understanding didn't need a lot of words. At first, you'd think, hey, that's a perfect balance. But those very differences, they would eventually become their biggest hurdle.
And that brings us to the next phase of their story. Because that gentle comfort, it started to shift. Suddenly, it felt like there were these unspoken rules, expectations, that neither of them really signed up for. The time when just being comfortable isn't quite enough anymore.
Right. That easy, passive feeling wasn't enough to sustain them. That relationships started to demand actual work, a constant negotiation of what they each needed. It wasn't just about feeling the love anymore, it became about proving it in a way the other person could actually see and understand.
And this is the real crux of their problem. Ayaan needed to hear it. He needed those words of reassurance. But Meher, she needed space to figure out how she felt. So his constant questions felt like pressure to her, while her silence, to him, it felt like she just didn't care. They were speaking completely different emotional languages.
And that's the real tragedy here, isn't it? There was no bad guy. It was just two good people, in love, who simply couldn't make the other feel seen. The hurt was completely unintentional, which, in a way, makes it feel so much worse.
So this gap in communication, it just kept growing. And it all led to a breaking point that wasn't some loud, screaming match. No, it was defined by this incredibly heavy, profound silence.
What used to be these wonderful shared conversations just turned into these frustrating cycles. Ayaan would push for a reaction, maybe thinking that even a fight would prove she still cared. And Meher, she'd pull away, thinking that her silence was the only way to protect what was left of their peace.
The end didn't happen all at once. It was a moment just like this. Maybe an evening conversation that just fizzled out. And in that quiet, that long, heavy pause, I think they both knew. The space between them had just become too vast to cross. They finally let go, not because they were angry, but because they were just so tired. The sheer effort of trying to be what the other person needed had become this massive weight, and the love itself was getting crushed underneath it all.
Letting go was the end of their story together, but it was the start of a whole new chapter for each of them. And honestly, it was a much harder one, figuring out how to heal all alone.
And as anyone who's been through it knows, healing is never, ever a straight line. For both Ayaan and Meher, it was slow. It was painful. The sadness would just hit them in waves, out of nowhere. Growth was happening, but man, it was slow.
What they were mourning wasn't just the person. It was deeper than that. They were mourning a time when love felt like a safe place, a sanctuary. They missed who they were inside that feeling of safety.
But through all that pain, something else started to grow, a new kind of wisdom. With time and distance, they started to see things with a clarity that they just couldn't have when they were in the middle of it all.
Separately, they both began to understand what really happened. Ayaan learned that real love has to be built on trust, not on a constant need for reassurance. And Meher realized that being honest, even when it's hard, is so much kinder than hiding behind silence. And together, in their own ways, they learned to accept it all, to stop playing the what-if game, and to actually be grateful for how the whole experience had forced them to grow. And that's kind of the beautiful final stage of their journey. All that anger, the hurt, it just faded away. And what was left was this quiet respect. The love never really vanished. It just changed its shape. It transformed into gratitude, for the lessons, for the memories, for everything.
Which brings us back to this. This is the ultimate lesson from their story, that maybe the greatest proof of love isn't fighting to hold on, but having the strength to let go with understanding. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is release someone, and do it with grace.
So, I'll leave you with that to think about. Is the greatest proof of love holding on or letting go? The story of Ayaan and Meher seems to suggest that real strength, and maybe even real love, is sometimes found in the courage it takes to say goodbye. Thanks for listening.